Welcome to another episode of VGN Weekly. Members of the Virtual Grip crew will recap the previous week's races and bring us one-on-one interviews with racers, league owners, and commentators, as well as others from within the sim racing community. Please like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our broadcasts. If you are a league owner or potential sponsor and have a broadcasting need, please visit virtualgrip.net for info on how to get in touch with us. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's go find some grip.
As the Virtual Grip Network gears up for another action-packed week of racing, let's take a quick look back at last week's race winners. Last Thursday, defending champion Eric Teapot Stout started from third and was quickly able to take the race lead only 13 laps into the night. Stout stayed out front through short green flag runs and multiple restarts and was able to stay out of reach, claiming his first win of the season in Red Light Racing's SK Modified Series at Kern Raceway. On Saturday night, James Lowe started deep in the field when the Bootleg Racing League's late model series came out to Southern National. Patience was the name of the game as Lowe quietly worked his way forward. After stalking Chris Davis for much of the second half, Lowe saw his opening with 6 laps to go. After an intense side-by-side battle, Lowe came out on top and secured his first win of the new season. The virtual week closed out on Sunday night with the OBRL presented by Victory Lane Sports, when their yesteryear Racing Cup series brought the action to Echo Park Speedway. Atlanta proved to be a real challenge for the drivers throughout the night, with several of the usual names left struggling. This created an opportunity for James Hislop to step up and lock himself into the playoffs, claiming his first win of the season in dominant fashion. Looking ahead to what's coming up this week on VGN, with the Independence Day weekend upon us, things are a bit quieter than usual, but there's still some great racing action to catch. Tune in this Sunday, July 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern as the OBRL drivers take on the tight and technical Chicago Street Course. Then, don't miss the next episode of VGN Weekly, airing Tuesday at 9 a.m. Our special guest will be Justin Michael, the reigning champion of the Maximum Velocity Racing League's ARCA Series. Now stick around as we take a quick break before handing things over to John Heyn, who's standing by with this week's special guest, VGN's own Jeremy Gridlock Scott.
And welcome back to VGN Weekly. I am your host, John Heyn, and I've got a very special guest this week, the newest member of the VGN family. It is Jeremy Scott. And Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. It's great to be a part of this. And, well, we'll see how much longer I last here after the show.
Oh, you can join us. I'm always surprised when I still have a job at the end of every week. So come join the dark side. So real quick, give everybody a quick background of kind of who you are and a little bit of your background. You got a very interesting background as you come to us here at VGN.
Yeah, so I've done professional racing for the past 15 or so years. I used to be a track announcer at a local road course, and decided to branch off and finally reach my dream of pro racing. I've done I've called everything from road course racing, whether it be, club racing to the upper echelons of IndyCar. I've done some stuff in sports car racing, and this season was kind of a sideline season, so I decided to get into sim racing, and it's been a lot of fun. My day job, if you live in the Midwest, chances are you've heard me on your radio or on your television. I've been told to say no more on television, so here I am doing radio and other fun stuff online. So, honestly, it's been a blast to do this. It's great that I can wake up, go to my computer, and I don't have to put pants on to announce. It's fantastic.
Wow, that sounds like a dream job altogether. Anytime that you can accomplish something, get paid, and not put your pants on,
Yeah.
how you beat that? Well, you talked about the road racing, the track. Which track have you been announcing at?
I was an announcer at the Audubon Country Club in Joliet for about 12 years. And I had a couple opportunities at the time, so I stepped aside, and one of them actually came through. But really, it was time because, you announce it for somewhere for so long, and you want to move up, but you don't want to be stagnant. So I felt it was time for me kind of to step aside, do something different, and it's worked out. I mean, in the end, I'm still the voice of the Elkhart Grand Prix, which is a kart race through downtown Elkhart, Indiana. Awesome street
Nice.
race if you have a chance. Yeah,
I'm actually familiar with that. That's very cool.
Yeah, we're actually a month away as of today, so I'm really excited about that.
Well, you're not too far from Kankakee. You can get over there and call some dirt racing too, or even Route 66 and do the drags or the dirt track there. So you've got some opportunities there if you go put somebody in a headlock there. If you wanted to get out of the right left turn and left turn thing anyway.
Well, and that's the thing. That's part of the reason why I came here is because I wanted to get some of that oval racing experience. I'm actually the closest track to me is Grundy County Speedway.
Oh,
and
Grundy.
What's funny
That's
is
a dirt track.
Yeah, no, that's actually a quarter mile asphalt.
Well, it used to be dirt.
Yes, it used to be dirt before Mazan closed back in the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was funny is my wife and I participate in the Grundy County Fair every year. And the guy's like, well, you have a great voice. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a racing announcer because I'm pointing out, they had different shots like Mark Martin, Dale Earnhardt, all the stars who've raced there. And he's like, oh, you got a great voice. I go, yeah, I'm a pro announcer myself. And he's like, oh, well, here, give me your number. I go, yeah, let's talk. I'd like to do streaming, talk about streaming and stuff like that. Never got a word until I found out this season they got a new track announcer. And my buddy's like, bet you didn't get a call from them. I go, nope, because I wanted to do something that they didn't want to do. So.
Oh, gotcha. Well, the online streaming now, you're calling these oval races, you're calling the Saturday night BRL SK mod, or not, but the late models now. You used to call the SKs, but that kind of, we're doing one, VGN's doing one broadcast this season. So what are your first thoughts about the oval stuff compared to the turning left, turning right?
It's a matter of just getting used to what the car does, because you spend time calling Porsches and prototypes and open wheel cars, and how a car is going to handle. On an oval, sometimes, it's just one line. Okay, that's great, now, but you got to figure out what tracks have the second line. And hopefully I don't sound too dumb when I'm announcing this, because to me, this oval stuff is still relatively new. Granted, I still watch oval racing, but it's a different animal calling races and watching them. So, I kind of still watch. Buddy of mine, Eric Brennan, actually is an ARCA announcer. He calls races on Flow for the Cars Tour. So I kind of model off of what he does. Yeah. So it's a different beast, but I like it because you get to see different strategies. You may think it's follow the leader when you're watching, but you watch the different lines, and that's why I point out, especially in the in-cars, okay, watch what these guys are doing. They're taking different entries into the corners, and I take that from road racing because you can get a faster line through the corners, which I find is really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the neat thing. Sometimes folks do think it's follow the leader, and that's such a misconception because, as someone who's been on the track with those guys Saturday night, sometimes it takes 5, 6, 10 laps to get around somebody, and you've got to take a different entry to get more speed out of the corner to set that pass up. It's amazing how many passes are made because they were set up 2 or 3 laps ago. And I've heard you do a really nice job of encapsulating that when you're calling the race. What have you found difficult about doing that because, there is a difference between being there and overseeing the track and being part of the action. You get part of that vibe being at the track, but now the sim world's a completely different thing. So, how have you felt about that, and how have you had to adjust to that?
Well, here's the thing. So a lot of the pro racing is starting to go remote. So this kind of helps me out get better.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, when I'm doing, racing at the track, yeah, I'm there. I get the vibe, but also I have a multi-view. So I see different camera angles at once. So I can only see what, Ryan puts on, or if I put on iRacing, I can see whatever I want to see. I can't see multiple views at once. So it's a matter of getting used to, okay, here's what's going on screen. I'm looking over at my timing because I have multiple screens here at my broadcast studio because, with doing radio and TV, I've got to have my radio feed or my television feed, and I've got to have, different news and different, like Google Maps to see what the heck's going on. So I'm used to having multiple views. Now I've got to train myself to, okay, well, I got to see, does production have something to tell me that they don't want to talk in my ear about? What's timing looking like? And that's why you'll hear me say, okay, well, we're watching these cars on the track, but you got a couple other cars who are, a tenth of a second behind each other. They've been closing up these past couple laps. So it's kind of basically it's kind of looking at, okay, yeah, you're seeing this picture, but I want to show you another picture that we might show a little bit later on, because that one looks like it's going to be developing. So utilizing the track feed and timing is really, it's a heavy balance, especially because 9 times out of 10, if you don't have the live feed, you don't know what's going on around different parts of the track. And it's a challenge trying to encapsulate, to tell the viewer, okay, yeah, you're seeing this, but I'm also seeing something else that might pique your interest. Keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and that's always a challenge, especially on a short track, because
Oh yeah.
BRL is a short track series, and you can have things going on in three different parts of the track, completely different parts of the track, and all of them are interesting and would be, people might have an interest in watching and that. So, that's the beauty of short track racing. You know, doing the road stuff and whatnot in real life. I mean, obviously, you're talking apples to oranges to short track and stuff like that. Um, how did you start and get into all of this? I mean, even from the real life, I guess we could call it your day job, doing some of the TV and radio. How did you get into all this?
Well, that started back around 2009. I, just graduated high school a couple years before that, and I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life. So I was listening to sports radio, heard about a broadcast school, and I thought, well, why not give that a shot? And during that broadcast school, I actually interned with the then Speed World Challenge broadcast team and was able to call some races with them and learn the trade. Um, but before that, I started announcing at Audubon Country Club. I was the first announcer, and they never had. It was our first season doing actual club racing, so why the heck not? And they took a chance on me, and then it was a matter of, hey, you know what? You guys are coming to the Midwest. Do you guys need anything? So sometimes I was just a de facto Midwest fill-in announcer if the pro announcer wasn't available. So that's how I got to do stuff with IMSA. That's how I got to do stuff with IndyCar, SCCA. I was one of the first traveling announcers with NASA. I got to my first network TV gig actually was with NASA, calling the Spec Miata Championship race back in 2011, actually on
Oh, wow.
Versus at the time. And
Versus.
funny story about that. Well, funny story about that one. So I applied to a radio station in Morris that next day. The news director, extra station director, took a look at my resume, looked me in the eye, said, we do real news out here. 2 years later, I was on the number one station in the Midwest doing news and traffic. So it's kind of a, funny story. Looking back on it, first I was like, well, that sucks. I got rejected in Morris, but now I'm in Chicago doing, WBBM. But also at the time, my now wife is like, if we want to move in, you've got to get a real job. So I ended up working for a traffic reporting agency, which I still work for today, and made my way to full time, and one of the top reporters and producers in the Midwest. It's a funny trajectory that brought me here, though.
Well, you talked about wanting to expand your portfolio, so you've come into
Right.
iRacing here. So, um, How did you find iRacing, first of all? I mean, that seems, to stream, because everybody now seems to have their own podcast, like we have here, our own podcast,
Mhm.
things like that. That seems to be the trendy thing to be doing now. But to actually come in and start, and not streaming yourself, but actually broadcasting it, I think that's still kind of new in a lot of circles. How did you find and how did you get into that?
Yeah, so last season I was working with a friend of sim racing, Joe Peak, and
Oh,
we were working the Porsche. We were working the Porsche Sprint Challenge together, and he goes, "Yeah, I have this sim racing company. I thought that'd be kind of cool to do something like that in the off season." Well, my wife and I ended up moving into a house, and I was trying to start poking Porsche Sprint Challenge. Hey, what do you guys got for this year? Are we doing this? Do you have a contract? And they're like, we just don't have the budget right now. It's like, okay, that's understandable. I'm used to hearing that. Better than go away. We don't want to hear from you ever again, which, I'm used to hearing that because that's the industry, but it is what it is. So Joe's one of the first people I called, and he's like, okay, well, I'll set you up here, and you could do this. And I thought about it. I go, while many people aren't going to be watching, the same breath as if I was doing something on YouTube calling live racing. It still
yeah.
gets me out there. It still keeps me fresh, and my name still is in the racing circles. So, I've been doing this. Joe Peak introduced me to Sean Ambrose over at iRacing, and Sean was the one who actually introduced me to Soup and Lowell as well. And Lowell and I talked over the phone, and this is what I've been doing. And what's great is, because I've been doing other things. I don't do just here. I do other racing outlets because you gotta just be everywhere if you want to get noticed. And
Yeah.
now it's given me a couple of great opportunities, which hopefully we'll be able to announce sometime down the road. But I'm really excited because I feel like, if it doesn't get me something next season, it'll get me something down the road, because now people globally are starting to see the talents that I've known I've been able to have, my inner circle known that I've had. And really, it's a lot of fun because I've met a lot of great people doing this.
Yeah, and the most important thing, especially in that line of work, have tape of yourself, so it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
where it is, and that's really kind of what this is providing you. Just, I mean, obviously you're having fun doing it, you're
Yep.
enjoying it. The being on the streaming side of it, I mean, how much are you actually enjoying the races? Since you're a road guy, it's funny. Motorsports fans are usually
Mm-hmm.
particular, even if you get down to the roots of like dirt. Late model guys scoff at the sprint car guys because they've got to be push started. The sprint car guys don't like the late model guys, and NASCAR guys don't like Indy car guys. It's funny, but you're a
Mm-hmm.
road guy, and now you're looking at doing the short track stuff. How much are you actually enjoying? I don't want to say actually enjoying, but how much have you learned, and how much are you enjoying it?
I've learned so much because I'm learning, okay, the late models, you've got the tire equity that Soup and I talk about every week. You don't want to burn that up too much. So, okay, now you've got to juggle being fast, saving your tires. That's interesting. How's that going to work with, the model? There's so many things that get into it. I love the technical aspect of racing. Don't get me wrong. The racing is fantastic with, BRL, both in the modifieds and in the, in the late models. And I enjoy every second of it because it doesn't matter if you're watching the battle for the lead or watching the battle for 16th. There's always something going on. Real quick, before I forget to, you're talking about tape. I actually had to start my own website a couple months ago because you talk to people and it's like, oh, what's your own website? So yeah, that's,
Yeah.
if you're getting started in this industry, you got to have your own website.
Oh, 100%. Business card to website. I mean, the
Yeah.
websites are the new business card. I mean, that's just, yeah. And it's not just in this industry. There's most industries and stuff like that. I know if I'm looking for somebody, I don't know, a handyman or something like that, if they don't have a website, I'm not, you know, but,
Yeah.
um, the racing's been fun and whatnot, and it's been really cool to listen to you to call them. You've stepped in almost seamlessly and picked right up, and it sounds like you've been an expert at it for years, which is really cool. What's been your favorite thing about the Saturday night stuff.
I've got to say what's really neat is we have the yellows going in. Okay, we're going to talk to this driver. We're going to talk to this driver and getting to talk to them within the broadcast. I think a lot of series would benefit from that because, you get inside the driver's head and you get to hear what the other's saying. And sometimes Soup and I like to say, okay, well, this driver said this and kind of poke the bear. I love poking the bear with you guys because it's loose, it's fun. And it's just so cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. I always love causing trouble. But I've got to say this. Those first couple races, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose,
Sure.
But the more I did it, the better I felt. And look, I'm having fun. I feel like I've got a great partnership with myself, Ryan Seneca, and Soup. We all mesh together.
Yeah, I mean, it comes through on the broadcast. I mean, you can just hear it and stuff like that. And I will say this too: it doesn't help that, or it doesn't hurt that you guys got a great group of guys to broadcast. Those guys give each other room. They race respectfully. I filled in for you the other week, and after I was done, I was like, man, I miss calling these things. I forgot how much fun they are to watch. Usually I've popped in every now and again to race them now that I'm not doing those, but that's you've really got a good group there. I don't know that every league in iRacing's like that. I've seen some that are not nowhere clear, so or close to the quality of those broadcasts and whatnot. So yeah, my advice to you though is if you're going to take up other broadcasts, make sure you do or other leagues, make sure you do your research because that makes things a whole lot easier. What is something where would you like to see yourself improve with those? Where do you think, if you go back and watch them, is there anything you ever catch anything and like, because I know me, I find myself doing mannerisms all the time. And then it's like, once I see it, I can't unsee it. And then by the end of the broadcast, I'm like completely annoyed. It's like, why didn't anybody ever tell me I do that? Do you have anything like that? Or do you ever come across anything like that?
I have actually a lot of times. It's more on my traffic side because that's my 9 to 5. That's my bread and butter. So it's there are some mannerisms that even sometimes I'll catch myself in the middle because you listen to yourself all the time and it's like, oh, I said that, I shouldn't have said that, or I screwed up here, I should have done this. It happens. It's broadcasting, and I've had some of my mentors say you've got to have the memory of a goldfish to do this. So say it. If it happens, oh well, it's out there in the open. That's life. And if people hate you for it, whatever. They that's
you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yes.
Yeah, the mannerisms, and like when I first started doing this, and like the first couple of broadcasts, like way back when I did this, it freaked me out because all of a sudden I realized I was going
yep,
which is a very common. And having to work to try to break those habits are sometimes interesting because it's I don't want to say habit, but it's like part of your DNA. It's how your mannerisms. So what would you recommend for folks that are maybe thinking about getting into broadcasting wherever they see themselves, but they don't like hearing because you've got to be able to listen and be able to judge yourself. That's how you get better. What is your advice for someone like me? I mean, I'm not a professional. I do some of these broadcasts for fun. What is your advice for somebody like me or somebody listening that's thinking about getting and doing this stuff about breaking some of those mannerisms to be fluent and smooth and I hate to use the word coherent, but on point. That's probably the word I should say, on point.
Well, first of all, don't get into broadcasting. I don't need any more competition that's already out there. Bar none. Done. No, seriously.
Okay.
Get used to hearing your voice. I'm not even kidding. Even when I started doing broadcasting, I hated the sound of my voice. You're going to hate the sound of your voice, but listen to yourself. That's how you're going to get better. And here's the thing. Your first several broadcasts, it could be your first 5, it could be your first 50, it could be your first 12. Those broadcasts they're gonna suck. It is what it is. It's just a matter of life. Lee Diffie probably had his first 5 or 6 broadcasts were awful, and look at where he's at today. The only way you're going to do something is if you keep doing it. Colleague of mine said you're only a master when you do 1,000 of the things at a time. So, you might get better at your first 10,000. That's what it was. When you do 10,000 broadcasts, you're going to be a master. It's just doing it over and over again. Listen back to yourself. And like you said, note the ums and the uhs. I like to call it the Danica Patrick syndrome because you listen to her. Even today, it's every
gosh,
fourth or
I've
fifth
never
word.
noticed that for her. You just probably
Oh,
just
yeah.
ruined every F1 broadcast that has her on it now. Oh,
Oh, well.
why'd you go
well.
there?
Hey,
Yeah.
you know what? That's why I can't watch F1 broadcasts, especially when she's on there. Or I'm glad I was at the 500 because, I didn't have to watch Danica Patrick on the broadcast, which is good. But I've done enough interviews with her. I've seen enough interviews with her that I can't get that out of my head. So you will say the fillers. For example, when I got back into live radio with WGN, the way it works is, okay, the news anchor says his thing, sports anchor says his thing, news anchor comes back with money, and traffic is sponsored by. I don't like saying unless I'm being thrown to, and because it sounds like you don't start a sentence with and so just going back and listening to that, and you send it to somebody else, send it to your friend and say, hey, be rough. You got to have thick skin to do this, though, regardless, because somebody's going to criticize you. You're all, there's always going to be somebody, a keyboard warrior who's just going to come and say, oh, well, you suck and all that. Look, it's going to happen. You're going to get better the more you do this. So just, keep at it.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is if you really stop and think about everybody that's been either in the entertainment industry, broadcast industry, any of those, everybody's been fired at one point in time or another. I mean,
yeah.
honestly, they have been. How many? I mean, I hate to use him as an example because he's kind of out there, but I mean, how many times did? I mean, everybody knows who he is, but Howard Stern. How many times did Howard Stern get fired? And he's done quite well for himself. So
look, I like to equate it as I had to train my replacement last year at a Chicago TV station. So I mean, it happens. That's the industry.
Yeah, it's a tough industry. One part I want to kind of focus on to kind of help everybody pull the curtain back a little bit to like our broadcasts and just broadcasting in general. And I think it's one of the most underrated pieces of it. But I want to talk about, how do you prep? You prep for a show because this a lot of times can make break, it'll make if you do it right, it'll make your life a lot easier when you go to execute. Can you tell me some of the differences, maybe how you prep for maybe a sim race? I mean, let's just start with that. How do you prep for Saturday?
So I find that actually a little bit more difficult than prepping for a pro race, and I'll kind of explain the
Really?
differences. Yes.
Wow.
I wish I would have. I wish I printed up my pro notes. Yeah. So, 9 times out of 10, when I'm not doing the VGN stuff, I'm doing races where you'll have like 3 or 4 drivers who run the same sim series, but you'll have others who either get lucky into the top split or they're just, they're part-timers. So you don't get their information, and sometimes you get lucky and you broadcast the same driver across 3 or 4 different series. That's great. But with the BRL, I look at the points. Obviously, I go back and watch what happened last week. What do I need to know from last week? Can I look at the previous season's results from that track? If not, where's the last time they raced at that track? Who was the leader? What's the vibe of the series? So that's how I usually prep. It doesn't take me too long, but it's still difficult. Whereas a pro series, I'm going to use Porsche Sprint Challenge as an example because that was the one I did last year. So each class had a different color number board. So I would go, okay, this number board's here. This is the car they have. This is the sponsor. Here's some of their history. I like to go back and look at history because I feel that when you're broadcasting races like that, your history is going to shape what happened now, and it's going to tell a story. I'm here as a storyteller. I'm telling the story of what's going on the track, what the stars are doing. So, it varies from series to series, but I find sim racing a little bit more difficult to do, and I think that's part of the challenge that I really enjoy about doing this.
That is crazy to me that is more, you find it more difficult. But I would think climbing in a helicopter hanging over the Dan Ryan would be, trying to remember exactly, okay, what is that exit? Oh, there's an exit there. That, to me, that's like way more difficult, my mind would be, but that's
little trade secret, I actually downloaded Google Maps onto my tablet, and I would have it with the GPS. I connected to the GPS of the pilot, so I would know where I'm at all times, and I would spend hours actually before I started flying learning the highways. I would take Google Maps screenshots. Okay, well, this is what this exit looked like, and I would study it. So if I had to go
and yet
to
you think sim
quickly,
racing is harder to prep for?
it is. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna take your word for it. I mean, I've never hung out, like I said, out of a helicopter looking down at the Dan Ryan at 6:00 in the morning, trying to tell everybody avoid this exit or that or whatever. But man, that's incredible. All that, I would have even thought that doing that, all that Google and all that kind of stuff, the maps and hooking everything up. Man, I always just thought, in my ignorance, I always just thought you guys were hanging out of the helicopter looking down, going, "Yep, there's a wreck right there. So here's what's going on. Here's where you want to avoid."
So funny story about that too. The first ever my first ever report flying solo with my pilot. We took off and I radioed. I'm like, all right, guys, up in the skies, flying into downtown. Reporter goes, no, you're not. Did you not get my text? I go, no. He's like, all right, you're going to 355. There's an overturned dump truck. I'm like, just my luck.
355 is out there a ways too. That's nowhere near downtown.
No, it's not. But our airport was actually right by there, so that kind of helped.
Where do you guys, just out of curiosity, where are you flying out when you say your airport? Are you going out? Well, Meigs Field isn't there anymore, so where are you guys flying out of?
We would fly out of DuPage Airport in West Chicago.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So which for me was great because it was a straight shot up, Route 59.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty wild. I would have thought for sure you guys have been going out of Midway because, I mean, Midway's like tucked in the middle of the city.
Oh, no.
So, well, what is I've got to ask, since we're on the topic of this here, getting into downtown, I mean, is it primarily looking at the highways, or do you actually get in there and, do you guys ever go over the Magnificent Mile or anything like that down there?
Sometimes we do, actually. Mostly, so we don't fly anymore because A, we lost the contract for the one broadcaster, but B, there's no more flights for radio. It's just TV, and even that's getting phased out because of the expense. But we would always have a certain route would fly us, through the tollways and then down on to Interstate 80. 9 times out of 10, our plane would stay down there because those who've driven, in the Midwest know how horrendous 80 was, and we'd always have at least 1 or 2 crashes.
It's under construction for 30 years.
It still is, to say the least. But sometimes I get lucky. We'd fly to breakers. There was one of them. I was doing television in the morning, went home, napped, woke up to about 10 missed calls, 3 Snapchats, a couple videos. Half those calls from my mom. You okay? You alive? Call me. We need to talk. I'm like, what the heck's going on? So I pull up Snapchat, and some guy ran into a back of a paint semi, and it just exploded. And I'm like, I call my pilot. I go, yeah, I'm on my way. I know where we're going, so don't worry about it. So some of those interesting stories, but 9 times out of 10, you have a specialized route that you fly.
That's that's completely different than what I'd envisioned. I'd always just envision guys are just up in the air circling the city, looking at the traffic. I mean, and that was pretty much it. A lot more difficult. Though, going back, I guess I'm backing up now that we've kind of went off this direction. We'll pull it back here a little bit. The prep for the iRacing. You talk about, researching the standings and the week before and all of this other stuff, the season before, yada, yada, yada. What do you think which one of the things do you think helps you the most? Is it looking at hey, what happened last week? So the momentum, is it the overall for the season? What do you think is the most important thing to convey?
So when I got started doing this, I thought, okay, because it's a fixed series, drivers who do well at a certain track, they're going to do well at that track all the time. But watching James Lowe's dominance over this past season and now starting into this season, that's when I learned maybe it's not all that. It's all about momentum. So it's kind of had me shift gears just a little bit. You take a look, especially the last half of the season, how good Mike Holloway was doing. We saw in the first week of the season that he was able to take that win. Well, now James Lowe's starting to really reel in those wins once again. So a lot of it's momentum, I think, especially in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that as a driver. When you're feeling really good and confident in your skills, it's good for a 10th on the track because you can put your car in places that you feel, if you didn't have that confidence, you probably wouldn't try. And sometimes most of the time anyway, when you got that big mo going, it works out because you're doing it the right way. When you're trying to make up, let's just say you're in a little bit of a slump, that's where you might overdrive a little bit. Hey, you know what? I've had bad finishes. I've got to get something good here. And I think that's probably what you're stumbling onto is guys that push sometimes run into trouble. It's really easy to do that on the track. I mean, sometimes as a driver, you got to step back and go, okay, maybe it's just not bad luck. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. And you do got to take that step back. And it's always humbling to do that. God knows I've done it, had a reset. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of times, but yeah, that momentum, you're right, plays a big part in that. You know, the you and Soup work together so well, and you're starting to get that cadence, and in the booth between the two of you guys. Um, I've worked with Soup for a long time, so I love Soup to death. So I know I can kind of needle him a little bit. Real quick, what has been your impression working with Soup? Because by God, he's a character. Yeah, he's fun to work with. I love working with Soup. So I am no means of trying to bag on him. He's freaking awesome. But what is your first impression?
I don't want to say it because I fear that I might inflate his ego a little bit. But no, he's one of my top 3 favorite partners in the booth. I've worked with legends of the sport. I've worked with people who are just coming up to the sport and everything in between. And Soup's one of my favorite. And yeah, for some reason we just automatically clicked. And when you have a booth partner like that, it makes the racing so much better, I feel.
It does. And Soup, all his Soupisms that he has, and sometimes I don't know if you've had it happen yet, but I don't know how many times I've had to hold from cracking my mic open because I'm just losing it, just laughing. And not even can't even find a comeback or anything to say because he'll throw something out there that just will utterly leave you speechless in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, working in news, I'm used to thinking on my feet, and there's been a couple times where it's like, I've got nothing to that. So, he's got me there. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago when I filled in for you, actually, I stammered him a little bit about some 3 wide and whatnot and comment. And I've known Soup for years. I've worked with him for years. I think that's the first time that the roles were reversed where I had him speechless for a moment. And that's now like my shiny moment. If I could put that up on my wall as a plaque, I would. But I've also learned a lot from Soup. As weird as it sounds and whatnot, he's really good at painting a picture, using words to paint pictures. And he really does an impeccable job with that. Since you inflated his ego, let's bring it down just a little bit here. What has been the biggest challenge? Because here's what I mean, not so much working with Soup, but in a lot of in the real world, you've got that person sitting next to you in the booth. You're in Chicago, he's in California. Tell me some of the challenges that presents.
It presents a lot because you're not sitting next to someone, you're not feeding off the energy that way. You've got to find a different way to feed off the energy. And it's like that with any remote broadcast. My past several remote broadcasts, I've had to somehow figure out a way to feed off the energy. And it is just so tough to do. I had a club race that I was calling back in May. So I was here in my my Chicagoland studio. Well, the racetrack was Willow Springs. And if you know where that
that's
is,
back out in California.
Yeah, out in California. And I actually tried to get one of my driver analysts who lives not too far away from me, tried to get one or two of them to come in and say, hey, you come do the race with me. That way we can have some sort of cohesion. And they're like, we're racing elsewhere that weekend. So I ended up getting my buddy of mine who I've worked with for years. He also comes from the radio industry, but he does what I call the dog and pony shows. He goes with different manufacturers to racetracks. Here's our car. Come try it out. We'll do hot laps, something like that. He's in Charlotte. So I had to work with him in my studio, him in Charlotte, the racetrack in California. We were able to do it, but it's difficult. You've got to find a way to mesh that energy to your broadcast partner, because you don't have that luxury of sitting next to them and feeding off them. But still, what I find funny is when I'm in the booth, and a lot of the guys do that, point. Okay, well, I see that, to kind of make a point.
Grab their arm.
Yeah.
Point over there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm just doing this like, oh, wait, there's nobody next to me.
Yeah. See, when I broadcast them, I am actually in VR. So I'm up in I actually put myself above the track in the almost like in the press box, so I can see everything. And yeah, I found myself at times kind of, reaching out to grab a hold of somebody, go, oh, over there. I can see it about to happen. But I think this internet thing is here to stay, because isn't it remarkable? You're one place, Soup's in another, then you got all these racers from all over the country, all on the same track. And actually, there's some times where we've got people all the way from all Australia, all over the world on the track at the same moment, running the same thing. To me, that is just so incredible. I mean, it really is.
It's going to blow up here in about 5-10 years, I think. And it's going to be, if it's not almost there already, it will be a good training ground for drivers to at least learn how to drive on the track without having to spend thousands of dollars doing go-karting and 1600s or bandoleros or something like that, so they can learn and save money. It's kind of like junior college, you're not spending a lot of money, but you're still learning.
Well, you're already seeing that. William Byron's a great example. What is that? Gran Turismo. You watch that movie, those kids they put in. I mean, you are starting to see that. And I've kind of wondered, back when COVID, and I'm sure that, being friends with Sean, you've probably talked about, or I don't know if you know, but, when COVID hit and they grounded everything.
Yeah.
Fox, iRacing, they put those cup cars on. And I wish to be God above that they would do that over the winter when everybody's grounded again, because to me, those races with those guys, letting their hair down in their rigs and just having a good time, that was the best racing that I've ever seen. It was just not racing, but how about it was the best entertainment racing wise that I'd seen in a long time. It was unique. You got to see those guys kind of laid back. You saw personalities. Granted, a couple of them got in trouble, but but it was cool. It was real. And I don't know that you see that, especially with those drivers around the track, because they've got their handlers there. So all the cameras there, they put their drinks in their hand, and okay, before you talk, you better take your drink, and make sure the product placement is all there. I mean, it's all so robotic. It drives me crazy. But when they did that broadcast, they're in their homes, they're in a place of comfort, they're joking, cutting up. That was real, man. I mean, it was cool.
And you had drivers cross-platform into different styles of racing too, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I saw Will Power running a UMP modified one time.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I was so disappointed too that we never saw Will out at a local track. Just have somebody give him a car and say, "Okay, here, go." Have a shot at doing it.
He's going to do something when his Penske contract's over. I can just feel it. I've loved watching Will Power since his Champ Car days.
Yeah, well, but he's one with personality. I mean, the thing is, he's a guy that moves a needle. Either you
Yeah.
don't like him or you do like him. There's very few that are like in the middle with him, and then there's a handful of guys that are like that. Kosin Hosabar is now getting to one of
Yep.
those. He's starting to get a fan. Either people like the guy or hate the guy. Logano. I mean, there's a few of them, and yeah, it. And since we're talking about it and the personalities, when you talk about bringing the drivers up in the booth for an interview, that does give them a chance to kind of show their personality. As a broadcaster, how do you pull that personality out? Because sometimes, folks, you hear the whole saying about being camera shy. Well, some
Mhm.
people, when they know they're being recorded or, on camera, they clam up.
Yeah.
How do you pull it out of them?
It's tough. The way I look at it, you got to be personable with them. You got to talk to them like you and I are talking, not like, oh, so well, so and so you're doing so good. No, you got to talk to them as if you're sitting on the couch next to them. Hey, you know what? That's a great run there. How the tires feel? I mean, they've got to be tearing up there. And unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of one of my favorite things I like to do after the recording. I shut the microphone off or whatever I'm recording, put it in my back pocket and go, okay, what's the real story? I need to know the real story. I won't use your name, but I can at least get a better feel for what really is going on. But I think doing the in-car interviews during the yellows, it's about as close to that as I can get.
Well, it is. And as somebody who's gotten in trouble for saying exactly what's on my mind in those moments,
Yeah.
you're right though, because you do get somebody maybe at a raw moment and things like that. And I know
Oh yeah.
there's a debate behind the scenes. Do you bring in drivers that might have just had an altercation on the track? You don't want to get in there. You don't want people calling each other out because then it bleeds over, and then you got a bad product because you got two knuckleheads out trying to wreck each other. Because hey, he
Well,
insulted me last week or whatever. But
in case in point, we had a driver. I can't remember if it was modified or late model, end of the season last year. Well, what you gonna do? I'm gonna take him out. Okay, have fun with that. And sure enough, he did. And, oh, I didn't mean. I'm looking at the chats. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm sitting there thinking, you. Okay.
well, I watched that episode, and we won't name names here, but sometimes, if you do say, and not, I kind of almost wonder sometimes, you don't even want to joke about something like that because then if it happens,
Yeah.
but you know, sometimes I know I've been in the car and it's like, okay, either they're blocking really bad or whatever, and it's like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna nudge them and say
Yeah.
either you're gonna get out of my way or I'm gonna move you. I'll give you a choice.
Yeah.
And I don't do that just right when I get to somebody. I mean, you're talking 5 or 10 mat laps, and if they're mirror driving and it's just like, okay, enough. We're sitting back here in 16th. You don't need to be blocking.
Yeah.
It's more of I see as a teachable moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't ever mean to wreck somebody. Maybe that's what happens. So we'll try to give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But yeah, I'm not going to give names and not episodes, but you'll have to go find it. But yeah, that happened last season where my jaw dropped when I saw it. But that's where the debate comes from,
Yeah.
because was that good TV? Oh yeah. And I'll lay money on it. There's somebody that if somebody was watching as their first broadcast, chances are they're going to tune in next week to see what happens.
And I'll admit,
That's how you build an audience.
And I'll admit, I took that as, okay, we're going to put that in the back pocket and we're going to see what happens here on this restart because we might see some action. Sure enough, we did. So,
Yeah. You got to be careful calling your shots. Like, always cracks me up that you hear them all the time now, that like, especially in NASCAR where, the team radios are monitored all the time. And all of a sudden someone will pop in there, will take them out, and boom, they take them out. And then they get on the camera and they're like, I don't know what happened there. Brakes were mushy. And it's like, you know, um, but that's good TV though. That's the whole rub. And that's why Lowell, I feel bad for guys like Alan Wanamaker and Lowell, those guys that have to run the leagues, because you have to balance putting a good product on the track, having a good community environment in the league. And they may not want to admit it, but part of racing and why people watch it, there is an entertainment value to it. It's NFL. It's competing there, but there's still you're watching it because it's entertaining you. You're watching, and racing is no different than basketball, baseball. You're wanting to see what the outcomes are, and sometimes if there's a little controversy, that's okay too. But I guess where I'm going is, where do you fit in on the? Do you like the conflict, or would you rather just kind of focus on the race itself?
So
Put
75%
you
of
on
the
the spot.
time, yeah, no, 75% of the time, let's focus on the racing. What's the track story going to tell me? The other 25%, you kind of do need that little spice in your race broadcast, because every meal needs a little bit of spice to taste good, to have a finished product. And I like to call myself an official name only, but I'm also privy to the penalty charts when I am a part of an official capacity. So I see what other drivers are doing. And when I see a driver's name, especially a fast driver who has to take a penalty, it's like, okay, that's going to be an interesting story. How will they get up to the front? How long will it take them to get around some of the slower traffic? So, like I said, I like the controversy, but let's keep most of the stuff on the track.
Yeah, and it's and Soup, to I guess somewhat his credit, he loves bringing people in right after those incidents, and
Oh yeah,
and like I said, that is such a hard balance to do, and we probably should stay away from it, because I could see that going south really easy. But in the same
yeah,
token, a couple times he's done it, and because I know some of the guys, and if you know their personalities, and if you interview them enough, especially for somebody watching,
yeah.
you almost know what they're thinking. You can almost hear I'm gonna get this guy in their voice, even though they may not be saying it, but you can hear it. And I love those kind of interviews and stuff like that. So, and we talk about working, and I know that there's I'm not the only one going to ask you questions here today. I know that we have a call from overseas here.
Oh
I at
God,
least need to let them come in one time here and ask the question here. I figure, as we're talking, soup and different things and different
yeah.
points of view, this is probably a good time to bring this overseas caller in.
All right.
First time caller, I think. Hello.
Hi guys, it's Hans in Austria. Long time viewer, first time caller. Here in Austria, one of the things we like to do, Jeremy, is we watch the police chase, those high speed chases on the autobahns here in the German area and the Austrian area. My question for you is, have you ever covered one of those in your career doing the news? And if so, has the bad guy ever gotten away?
Well, Hans, first of all, I wonder if that's a Middle European word for soup. We'll figure that out later. I'll look at the translation much later. But according to the thick accent, yeah, I actually have. That's a fun story. We're talking earlier about the routes we used to fly. So we're coming off of 294, banking a right. And my pilot and I, between hits, we'll usually talk and, catch up on life and all that. So I'm looking down, I'm looking ahead, and I see a police car blocking the road. So my pilot go, the hell's that? I don't know. Looks weird. I've never seen that. What the heck's going on? Next thing you know, I see a car just burn rubber to the right. 1, 2, 3. I'm like, speed up. We got to chase. So I call base. I go, hey, have you guys heard about a police pursuit? And they're like, no. I'm like, all right, come to me when we can, because we got one. So I was the only one who was on top of that police chase, and I saw them, chasing each other. We caught up, and next thing you know, I see somebody throw something out, and they ended up getting away. Turns out I forgot what they were going after, but they threw a gun out, had to close down the road, do a search of it. The wildest, shortest police chase I've ever done, and the only police chase I've really ever done.
How the heck in this day and age do you get away?
Well, again, this was about,
because they got LPR cameras like everywhere. I mean, man, that's incredible. They got away.
Well, John, this was before the LPR cameras. This is 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Exactly. But then again, you have fingerprints. You still can't get away from fingerprints. And you also can't get away from a Motorola either.
Fingerprints are only as good as if you've committed a crime. If you're not in that
very
database.
True. That's true. Yep.
having the line of work that I'm in now, I see a lot of that stuff too. But um,
Yeah.
that had to be interesting. Do they? Do you get a call from the when something like that happens? And generally speaking, and maybe not in so much your experience, but do police call you and say, "Okay, we need you to kind of get a spotlight on them or follow"? I mean, does contact happen at that point when you're doing that?
So it works two different ways. One, if we're over the scene and they can't get a helicopter over there,
Yeah.
they'll be like, "Hey, we hear you guys. What are you guys seeing?" Or 9 times out of 10, "Hey, we hear you guys. Get the hell out of here." And I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
first of all, that's not us because we don't have a helicopter. Second of all, I'll see what I can do."
Yeah, because you don't want helicopters colliding over.
No.
I mean, I can see some of that. So,
Yeah.
well, we got to thank Hans. I feel like we're an international show now, so I guess I've got that going now for us. But
Yeah, Hans.
you're talking about 294, and again, going back to Chicago. NASCAR this weekend. I guess it's timely that you're on here. NASCAR is going to be running the
Yeah.
streets of Chicago, which um, that's going to create some traffic nightmares because they've got
You
um
know,
Lakeshore and all that like
yeah.
blocked off. I'd have to imagine what a freaking nightmare that's got to be.
I'm glad I don't work weekends anymore. I'll say that much. Yeah, it is 3 years on, and it's still one of the craziest things ever, but it is so cool to see because I'm a huge street racing aficionado. And it's neat driving downtown and seeing, Columbus with walls on it, Balbo. I actually, the first year they had it, I purposely left my garage after work and drove down Jackson just because I've never driven on a street course before. I've been to street
Mm.
courses, but I had to drive down it. It was so cool to drive on a street course,
Yeah.
Uh, um, but it's really neat to see how the city embraces it. Will it come back next year? I don't know. If it does come back, it might be, obviously it may still be, Cup and Xfinity, but I remember the rumors of them saying, "Okay, we're gonna have prototypes here with, supporting Cup and Xfinity." Oh, that would have been cool. On second thought, we're gonna have MX5. Oh, that would have been even better. If you
Yeah.
ever have a chance to watch MX5 Cup racing, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always thought that venue
Mhm.
would be perfect for IndyCar. Just the demographics of Chicago, everything else. I mean, I've always thought that would be more of an IndyCar crowd because you're going to pull up from Indianapolis, Indiana,
Yeah.
Wisconsin's got a huge IndyCar following up there. That would actually be a fantastic location for IndyCar. But one bone I have to pick with iRacing, I haven't pulled up the Chicago Street Circuit in a long time, but how do they scan that and not get the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier on that scan? What was up with that?
Well,
God help me if somebody from iRacing's watching because they've got such a great platform and they always do so good at the attention to detail. I mean, you
mhm.
go to a Mola and they've got the if you find the right corner where Ayrton Senna lost his life, you see the
Yeah.
shrine that's there. It's remarkable the detail, and they don't get the Navy Pier.
Well,
Seriously,
you,
iRacing. But I'll
you, you understand they scanned that in the dark of the night, in the middle of the night during COVID when nobody was out on the street. So you can't
are you
fault them for not.
serious?
Seriously, that
I
was
did not know that.
yes, it was a huge story in Chicago media on. Well, they're doing some scanning. Does this mean we'll get NASCAR? And I laughed. I go, no, they're just going to build a track. And sure enough, here we are.
Yeah, because the track was announced in iRacing before the race.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, yeah. Which is really
So
cool with iRacing because they did that prototype kind of like the IndyCar / Formula One mix up.
yeah.
I forget what that car, but iRacing is now it is actually doing some of that track design and car design and actually working with OEMs to
Yep.
do stuff like that. I mean, it's like you said, 5 or 10 years, boy, this stuff's gonna look a whole lot different. It'll be a lot more complicated too.
Yeah. It really will be.
But yeah, but are you going to the race this weekend?
I don't think so. I I have a couple friends who will be running the Xfinity series, but if I run into them, they're like, hey, we got a couple extra tickets. Yeah, I'll try and figure out a way to go, but I just don't see it happening. I go to the city 3 days a week. This week I'm going in 5 because I'm helping out with one of the TV stations, and where I live, it's a pain in the butt. Even on a normal day, it's
Well,
pain in the
I
butt to
can't
get up and down.
imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine getting down there. I mean, I honestly, I think parking in those garages at Navy Pier and walking over to the venue is probably about the best that I can think of, or
Yeah.
even parking next to the House of Blues in those towers.
I parked there before. There's actually a good breakfast joint there too. So if you're going to the NASCAR, it's called Yoke.
Okay.
It started off in Chicago, but they've kind of branched nationwide.
Mhm.
Fantastic place to get breakfast.
Well, since we've told stories here, and I want to see if you recognize this place, because one time my buddies, they took me to Chicago, took me to a
Okay.
restaurant. I didn't know, they didn't give me any background, so I didn't know if I was going to get seafood, steaks, pasta. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk in, and this is where this might get you. I see the sign Ed DeBevick.
Oh,
I had no idea what I was walking into. And I'm going to let you real quick fill everybody in what Ed DeBevick's, because you're probably more familiar with it than I was. I had one experience there.
Yeah. So Ed DeBevick's, if you've ever been to Dick's Last Resort, that is kind of how Ed DeBevick's is, and that's their whole stick. Their cheeseburgers are good, but actually, it's funny. It's one of my coworkers is one of the DJs there at Ed DeBevick's. So I hear Ed DeBevick's. I hear stories from there all the time. But yeah, the servers are they love to be rude, and you know what? You can give it right back to them.
And let me paint the picture. We walked through the front doors there, and all my buddies took a step back, so they knew I was first. Waitress walks by and goes, "What do you guys want?" I mean, just in the snarkiest voice, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I didn't know. And then we sit down, and then another waitress goes by. "Oh, I guess you guys want a menu." Turned around to the people on the booth next to us, grabbed the menus out of their hands and gave it to us. At this point, I'm like, what in the, I mean, I'm about ready to get up and walk out. And at this point, that's when they lose their poker face. They start dying laughing. And you're right. By the end of it, lots of back and forth, a lot of fun. They hire actors within the city to do that. And it's so, completely different off iRacing and everything else. But if you're in Chicago, I recommend the Ed DeBevick's experience at least once. But hot dogs too.
Yeah, I forgot where my wife and I went to, but we went to one of those style of restaurants, and I went toe to toe with the waitress, and there was one point where I made her break, and I'm like, okay, I do have it still. Anybody that goes through the Windy City, I just recommend at least one time. Better yet, if you're hearing this, take somebody you don't know and let them walk into it, because that's always. Because like I said, I was almost going to deck somebody before I kind of figured something was going on. So, I've enjoyed talking to you here, and getting to know you a little bit. And welcome to the VGN family. You said that, you do got some things kind of working, some things that you can't announce yet. Is there any future plans you do have maybe that we can glean into, or is it still a little hush hush? We got to bring you back in and talk about it when you're ready. Well, we'll bring them back in when we talk about when we're ready. But if you are in the Elkhart, Indiana area, and really anywhere within 2-3 hours, please come on down, watch some great go-kart racing.
That's fantastic, by the way.
It really is, yeah. And I'm hearing that it may even be streamed. So as soon as I find out about that, I'll let you know, because I heard I'm working with one of my directors from Porsche Sprint Challenge on that. But it is an absolute blast.
And it's not just a race, but it's a community event. I mean, the whole, it's a really, really good time down there.
And, families come down, and, they'll bring their whole family, and they'll race, and they'll put up pop-up tents around the circuit. To hear me yell at people for not crossing the hot racetrack, I've got another story about that, but definitely come on down August 1st and 2nd, free admission. There's a car show, there's a running race, there's a karaoke contest, there's a concert on Saturday, there's fireworks. there's something for the whole family. So definitely come on down. It's the Elkhart Riverwalk Grand Prix. USAC sanctions it. It's Southern Indiana Racing Association.
USAC sanctions that now?
Yes. That is
that's newer.
That happened in the past couple of years. So they sanction because it is a road event through city streets. I think that's why they sanction it, or the city of Elkhart contracts it out. Yeah, this is a recent development. So
that's cool.
I've basically, after last season, I was told by USAC that the gig's mine till I say no more. So I'll take it. You know, that's a legendary event.
That makes me want to drive up here from St. Louis now. Well, very cool. Well, yeah. I hope. Give the dates real quick. The exact dates.
August 1st and 2nd. It's a Friday and Saturday, so they'll be practicing on Friday, qualifying and racing on Saturday after the running race. And Friday, I think they're going to do the Mayor's Cup as well, where they do. It's really interesting. So they'll take rental carts out. One driver will run a lap or two, then they'll swap in pit road. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, very cool. Well, man, Jeremy, I really thank you for giving me your time here this evening. It's been just an absolute blast. I think you and I could probably do this for another hour and a half, easily, actually, on a whole host of different things, probably. But, you know, I always end the shows. I don't know if you ever watch these, but I kind of do a little green-white checker. So just real quick, throw a couple things at you, get your first thoughts. You ready to play along?
Let's go.
All right. First one. Streaming, doing the sim broadcasting, or being in the chopper? Which one is more fun?
Streaming, because I'm not worried about turbulence and not having to come down to a worried significant other.
Fair enough. Second one. What is the Bears over and under this year?
Oh, you know what? I'm going 8.5, and I'm taking the over, surprisingly. I'm not saying because of Caleb Williams. I'm not a big Caleb Williams fan.
Well, he hasn't earned it yet, but that's big, you know, you got a tough division up there, man, with Jordan Love up there north of you guys and what Dan Campbell's got going out there, but out east of you.
See, Dan Campbell's the only thing that worries me. I'm not worried about the Packers this year because I'm not holding too much confidence in Jordan Love. And the Vikings, they might come and surprise somebody.
Well, Campbell's lost his offense and defensive coordinator. I mean, you guys got his offensive coordinator, so, you know, so we'll have to see. So you're going with the over. All right. Yep. The very, very last thing here, I would say if you could give one piece of advice, go back and tell your younger self, what's the one piece of advice you tell the younger self about broadcasting?
Take every opportunity you get. You know, it may be little, it may be big, but it will eventually lead somewhere. And, you know, you've got a lot of great people to lean on. So lean on them and just say yes. That's what I tell people. You know, there's sometimes I look back and it's like, why did I say no to that? But it's led me to be a better broadcaster. So take every opportunity, run with it, and own it. You know, I mean, it may be a bad move, but you know, hey, you're going to be a better person for it.
Just say yes. That's how I got my wife to marry me. I was like, just say yes. Be original. Everybody else says no. So, all right, my friend. Well, very good to talk to you. And I do want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July this week. You guys, make sure everybody comes back next week and you have all 10 of your digits. So have fun out there. Enjoy your families. We will see you right here next week on VGN.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of VGN Weekly. Join us next time for race recaps, interviews, and much, much more. Please like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our broadcasts. If you are a league owner or potential sponsor and have a broadcasting need, please visit virtualgrip.net for info on how to get in touch with us. This has been a production of the Virtual Grip Network and the Skidder Creek Motorsports Group.